On Radio Row, Andrew Mason here with special guest Aaron Schatz of FTNFantasy.com. I'm sure you know his work from Football Outsiders for many, many years in ESPN. So, first of all, good to have you here, Aaron.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to chat with you. Let's start here. Early in the season, the Broncos, their defense was setting historic DVOA lows.
Yeah, like it was ridiculously bad for the first, I think it was 5 games.
Yeah.
And then completely turned around.
Yeah. When you dove into the numbers, where did you see that turnaround coming from?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere, everything. I mean, it was so bad that literally everything had to get better and did. I think, cornerback coverage certainly got better. Pass rush got better. Everything got better, and it's interesting, they were so bad in those first few weeks that they ended the season 30th, but they're not really 30th going into next year because that's not really what they were for the last half of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is like, I know there are some out there who are like, Vance Joseph, needs to go, but the improvement over this as the season went on, and they did kind of take a half step back there against New England and Detroit late, but still overall, this was a unit that profoundly got better. Some of it was personnel, Baron Browning getting healthy, for example. Some of it was just better use of the players.
Cooper was good, right? Kind of really came out of nowhere there. Mm-hmm. I know that free agency-wise, cornerback is probably going to be a big, needing people to play opposite Surtain is going to be a big concentration for them with free agency, and that will be important. It's tough. Cornerback play is tough, man. No matter what we do to try to measure it, it's very inconsistent from year to year, which makes it really hard to predict who's going to really be a good cornerback, especially when you're looking at those sub-elite guys. You're run-of-the-mill, the guy who's going to play opposite Surtain.
Right, because they started the season with Damari Mathis.
Yeah,
and
bad.
Then he was dreadful. Unfortunately, he regressed from a promising rookie year. Then you got Fabian Moreau out there, and he's all right, but he was all right, faded late. And a few weeks ago, George Payton, general manager, talking about Riley Moss, for whom they traded up last year in round 3 as someone they see as a starter, even though he barely played last year.
Yeah, I mean, if that's good, if they feel like he developed his rookie year and they can get him in, that's good. The expectations will be who knows, right? No one knows what to expect. Yeah. I believe that Kawan Williams is a free agent also, so they'll need a slot corner as well, or they'll need to re-sign him. So you have to think of it as 3 starting cornerbacks. So if they do think that Riley Moss can be one of those guys, they still need to sign one.
Big question, obviously, on Russell Wilson. What did the data show you on Wilson working with Sean Payton this past year?
I mean, I thought he was better than people thought he was. The numbers are not as sad as the way people watched. It seems like his bad games were timed to national television, and so overall, I believe Denver was a top 10 offense. I think they were like 9th. But it's funny, it really doesn't matter what I think about, because it's pretty clear they're moving on.
Yeah.
Right? So, we can talk about, was Russell Wilson better than, people said he was? It doesn't matter. They're not keeping him. They're moving on to the next thing. I just don't know what the next thing is going to be.
If you were the Broncos, what would you do?
Keep Russell Wilson and not swallow all that money on my cap. I mean, the alternatives are draft a quarterback, which I think that they won't get a shot at the top 3 guys, and then where they are is
12.
Yeah, that's probably too high for the next level of guys. So I suppose you could try to use a second-round picks if a Michael Penix falls to 44 or something.
But they don't have that because of the Sean Payton trade.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And
okay.
Funny. They don't have the second-round pick. And the way they executed that deal, it was basically they trade their second and they got a third-rounder back. So they would have had 2 third-rounders, except they sacrificed the extra third-rounder to move up and pick the aforementioned Riley Moss in round 3 last year.
Or you get a caretaker like a Ryan Tannehill or something. Is that really better than Russell Wilson? I mean, the highs are not as high and the lows are not as low. So, yay, the lows are not as low, but the highs are not as high. And the overall performance, I think Russell Wilson even though he does dumb stuff sometimes, is better than Ryan Tannehill. So the weird thing is, I think what I would do is just keep Wilson for one more year.
So you mentioned the highs aren't as high and lows aren't as low for Tannehill, and that sort of is the conundrum of Russ, because beyond structure, he does some magical things, but then a couple of plays later, he's missing the 5-yard, quick out to a running back out of the backfield. So, in analytically speaking, is this just kind of two roads to the same destination? The high variance road of Russell Wilson and then the lower variance road of a Tannehill, perhaps?
Well, it sort of depends what kind of rest of the team you have. If you have great skill players, offensive line, defense, then I think you want more of the Tannehill type.
Yeah.
If you feel like you need to maximize the possibility of doing great things because the other parts of your team are not as good, then I think you want the Russell Wilson type.
Yeah. Sean Payton seems like he does not want the Russell Wilson.
No, I mean, that's the thing is I can say, well, what I think they should, but it doesn't matter. It's pretty clear bridges have been burned. He's not coming back. They're going to figure out a way to release him. It's going to be a gigantic cap hit swallow, but it's pretty clear that that's coming from a personality reasons.
You mentioned the Broncos being a top 10 offense in DVOA, and yet there were pretty significant chunks of the year where they struggled to generate points. Like, what's the disconnect there as you see it in the Broncos
Probably,
offense?
I'd have to look closer. It might be pace. It might be defense. It might just be field position because of the defense being poor at the beginning of the year meant opponents always had really good field position and they always had terrible position, so they were getting yards, but they weren't necessarily getting points.
Also, one more thing. We haven't touched on special teams, but there is special teams DVOA, and the Broncos had their highest ranking in several years.
Yeah, what usually happens with the Broncos is that they have bad punting and kicking that looks like it's good because of the altitude. And instead this year what they had was reasonable punting and kicking and Marvin Mims.
Marvin Mims, who after the Buffalo game, to kind of say national television gets people's attention on Russell Wilson, national television got people's attention on Marvin Mims Jr. in Buffalo on Monday Night Football, because after that game, when he was AFC Special Teams Player of the Week, nobody kicked to him after that.
Yeah.
Everyone got scared of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's, once you get noticed, people notice you. And I think, obviously, the big hope is that he does more as a receiver next year. He didn't do much as a receiver this year. You don't draft a guy that high just to be a return man. You want to get good stuff out of him as a receiver, but as a return man, he's very promising.
All right, Aaron Schatz, FTNFantasy.com. If you're looking for those DVOA rankings that we cite all the time on Orange and Blue Today, that's where you can check them out going forward. Aaron, pleasure having you here, my friend.
Thank you for having me.